Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers in search of creative teaching strategies. Whether you're new around here or you've been listening from the very beginning, I'm really glad you're here for today's edition of Highly Recommended. This week, I want to share a quick push for trying book clubs this year. If you haven't jumped on this trend yet, I want to give you a few key reasons why I hope you will. Okay, so let's start with a super fast unpacking of what a book club is, in case you haven't heard about these. So with a book club unit, they're a lot like literature circles. They're basically the same thing, except without the formalized roles that literature circles often entail. In a book club unit, you're going to give students choice over a set of books. Maybe those books are all about identity, or maybe they're all dystopia. Maybe they're all novels in verse. Somehow you bind them together through a theme or essential question. And then maybe you have 5 books or 7 books or 8 books. Maybe you buy copies of them all, or you work with your librarian and you order a bunch of copies of each book just to have in your classroom. You're going to let students sort of preview the books, sign up for the book that they're excited about, and then they're going to meet in groups throughout your unit to talk about their book, do activities related to their book, and then probably present their book back to the class in some way at the end. In the meantime, you may also be doing other things in class. It's not necessarily your sole focus for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever. It's one thing that's going on. Now, I'm hearing from tons of teachers that they're having success with book clubs, that they are a powerful thing. I've talked before with teacher Krista Barber, quite a few episodes back, about her success with book clubs in her middle school classroom. And more recently, I've talked with Caitlin Lohr, who was teaching a senior class novel and verse book clubs unit, about her success with it. So you can dive much deeper if you want to. But let me just talk to you a little bit today about why I think you should try them this year if you haven't yet. My number one reason is that you are able to present your students with choice and a diversity of perspectives when you incorporate book clubs. So let's say your theme is identity. If you were going to do this as a whole class text, which would be great, and you can totally do that, you would choose one book for all your students to read. You would have great reasons for choosing it, I'm sure. But every student is reading the same text to represent that theme of identity. Now, you can bring in paired text, poetry, videos, short stories to sort of bring more perspectives to the question of identity, and that is all wonderful. But the nice, easy thing about book clubs is that by providing students with 6 or 8 different books that are different angles on identity, you can let them pick something that they relate to, or pick something that provides a window on identity that they don't know about, that they're really interested in, or maybe that's written in a style that they find really exciting, that they love, or a style they've never tried before that they really want to get into, right? For all different kinds of reasons, providing them that diversity of book choices can be really beneficial for them, not just for their engagement, but also for their learning, for their understanding, for their joy in the book clubs. Okay, another great thing about book clubs is that you can provide a deep exploration of a specific theme or genre by coming at that theme or genre through so many different books. Now, you might think, well, kids are only going to be reading one book. It's basically the same as doing a class text for them. But really, when you have all these kids in the room reading all these different books, talking to each other, listening in on each other's conversations, hearing each other's presentations back to the class whenever you do a whole group thing, they are going to end up being exposed to more than just their own book. And so in that way, it's kind of cool. If you're looking at dystopia and you have some kids reading a collection of dystopian poems, and some kids reading a novel in verse that's dystopian, and some kids reading, an action thriller that's dystopian, and some reading magical realism that's dystopian. I don't know, like all these different angles. That is all sort of swirling around everybody in the class, and I think that's pretty special. Okay, another great thing about book clubs, in my opinion, is that they're less stressful for you. You give every group some agency and you give them some momentum when you set them up to choose a book they're really interested in. And then you create a routine that the book clubs run through every time. You know what's coming on book clubs days. Your kids take over. They have a little more of the leadership. You're floating around from group to group. You're still very important, but you're not up there at the front, which I think is lovely for your students and for you. And it's kind of something you can rely on. If you can come up with a routine for book clubs that works really well for you and your students, you can implement that across all your courses. You can maybe even implement several book clubs units per year. And when they're humming and they're successful, that is going to really take stress off your plate. Okay, one more reason why I'm going to suggest that you try book clubs this year. It's kind of a cool way that you can consolidate required texts if you want to have room for more voices, more perspectives, maybe new, more contemporary books in your curriculum. So let me give you an example. I was teaching an American Lit class, and on my book list, I had Hemingway, The Sun Also Rises, and I had Gatsby. And I really didn't have time to read them both with everything else that I wanted to do. And yet I loved things about both of them. I wanted students to have the opportunity to at least know something about both. And so for that course, I did like a mini book clubs, and I had 2 groups reading The Sun Also Rises and 2 groups reading Gatsby, and they got to choose. I had a day where I sort of pitched both books, told them all about it, asked them, do you want to visit 1920s America, the world of flappers, think about the American dream, think about this, learn about the mafia, like all these different things. Or do you want to go to an exciting small town in Spain and experience bullfighting culture and talk about this? And, and I kind of played up both worlds of the text, and then kids chose, and they got to learn a little bit about both texts, but they really got to do a deep dive with one. And by doing that, I was able to bring in quite a bit more contemporary voices in an identity unit that I was planning. I got to do a poetry slam and have a lot of contemporary poets in my curriculum. It just gave me a little bit more breathing room, right? And that is something sometimes we really need. Another way that book clubs can allow you to bring in more voices, if you're not allowed to sort of consolidate any required text through book clubs, if you can carve out a little bit of space for a book club unit in addition to all your required texts, at least it allows you to bring in a bunch of authors, a bunch of perspectives in your book clubs. So you see what I'm saying? You can either consolidate some required texts so that you can have more room for other things, or if you absolutely have to get through a certain amount of required text, but you can carve out 3 weeks at some point in the year for book clubs, at least you can bring in like 7, 8 contemporary authors during that unit and have more of them on your students' radar. Okay, so either way, however you play that consolidation, you get a chance to bring in more contemporary voices to your classroom, which I think is really wonderful and important. So folks, I've been repeatedly hearing from teachers about their success with book clubs. I think it is such a positive trend in teaching. So today I just wanted to say, if you've been hemming and hawing about whether it's worth setting up your first book clubs unit, I highly recommend it. Once you've got one under your belt, you'll learn a lot. You'll be more prepared for round 2, and I'll be really surprised if you're not soon planning them across all your classes. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about book clubs. I hope you're feeling excited to try out your very first book club unit. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.